Right, folks, in this video, we're going to discuss Quarto documents. Now, Quarto documents form the backbone of this course in the sense that your challenges and your final are all going to be written in this format. Once you get the hang of them, they're really easy to work with. Why we use these? So, Quarto documents allow you to combine prose, code, and other outputs like graphs and tables all in one document. So, really helpful for a data scientist because you want to show your code, you want to show your outputs, and you also want to describe these outputs. So, this allows you to have everything in one place as opposed to having like a Google Doc or a Microsoft Word file and then a script alongside it. It also allows for reproducible code. And so, this means that you can save this file and you can go back to it. You can rerun it, or someone else like me, your instructor, or Aiden, our TA, we can run all of your code using the Quarto document. Some basics. So the files are going to end in .qmd. That's how you know it's in the Quarto format. It has a YAML header. YAML means yet another markdown language. So if you're familiar with that, excellent. If you're not, that's totally fine. And this header is going to give you provide for metadata. So things like name or date. Your code chunks are always going to start and end with those 3 backslashes. So that's how you start the code portion of the document. You can edit your prose with things like headings, or you can make your text bold, you can italicize it, you can add in hyperlinks. And it's going to render to an HTML, PDF, or Word document. And by render, I mean the file converts. So you start in the QMD, and then you click render. It'll output in whatever file format that you choose. In this class, we're going to ask that you render to HTML, and all of your challenges and your final will be submitted both in the QMD and HTML files. Some really quick tips just before we move to looking at Quarto in our studio. Make sure that you put your name as the author in that YAML header in the metadata. We will be checking for this. We do take off points if you don't include your name or if you don't include the date. Always, always, always double check what your rendered document looks like before you submit it. So one of the biggest issues that I see in students is that sometimes people accidentally put a space in front of the code chunk. So that means there's a space before those 3 backslashes. That's going to cause a rendering error. So make sure that you just look over it once or twice before you submit to make sure you don't have that sort of an error. If you're struggling with formatting, my suggestion is that you use the visual editor in our studio to adjust the text formatting. So things like bolded lists or hyperlinks, and then make sure that you're always using the source editor for writing code. So I have created an example document for you. It is available on Canvas, and I encourage you to run through the examples that I have here. You can see what I've done is I've opened up my DAX 601 project, and I have a folder called example code that I keep all of the example code that I create for you all. You'll notice too that there is an image file. I'm going to share this with you as well on Canvas, so that way you can pull the image into your own document when you are working through this on your own. Going back here, this is your YAML header. So this gives the document a title. So for example, I have Quarto example. Your homeworks will say challenge 1, challenge 2, and so on. And the author. Make sure that you always change it to be your name. I like to use last modified for date. You don't have to. You can hard code the date. You can play with the other date options. I like last modified just because it shows when I edited that document last, but make sure that you have some sort of date in your document. Some other things, we have HTML formatting because I always like to have the documents formatted to HTML or rendered to HTML in this course. And I like to add a table of contents. So that's what TOC means. TOC set to true. And then that TOC location is set to right. You don't have to have this. It just makes it a little bit easier to navigate the document. So you can see here, my headings are associated with that table of content, just like what you can do in Google Documents. As I note here, I usually do recommend having a code chunk at the top with all of your packages. Don't worry, we're going to talk about this in the next few weeks, what packages are, but that's where they usually go. Have something at the very, very beginning that just loads all of the packages that you will need. You see here that I also include a label. You don't have to do this again. Quarto is very, very customizable. I'm not expecting anything super super perfect. I just want to have the basic functionality for you here, but you can make it fancier. So play around with the different options. What this label does is it makes it so that I can click through my different chunks down here in this menu in the bottom left. So chunk 1 I know is packages, chunk 2 is my graphic output, and chunk 3 is practice, as we'll get to. As I noted, you can create different sized headings. The more hashtags you add, the smaller the headings become. And you can see this in the visual editor as well. So as I suggested, if you're struggling with creating or editing your prose, this menu has different header options. It gives you options for creating a bolded list or a numbered list, and so on. But when it comes to your code, I always recommend that you use the source editor just because it gives you numbers. So let's say you run something, you get an error down here. It's always going to tell you what line that error happened on. And so you can just go right back and easily see. Let's say the error happens to be at line 41. You can go and see, oh, maybe I forgot a, a line, something like that. So you can play around with adjusting the text. You can make it bold. You can create lists. One thing that I've noticed is if you don't leave a space between the text, so here I have the text, you can create lists on line 28. If you go right in to creating a list below it, it's going to have a rendering error. So when I say render, I mean I want this document to turn from that QMD to HTML. To do so, I click render, and you see it pops up right here in my web browser. And here's my example. That's not going to create the actual list format if I don't leave a space. And this is why we want to render early and often. I encourage you to render at least a few times while you're working on your challenges, because then you can catch, oh, oops, I meant for this to be a bulleted list like so, but because I didn't use the right spacing, here's an error. So let's go back to that document. Another option are the outputs. So you can adjust how you want your code chunks to show up. Here, what I've done is I've created a code chunk that includes a screenshot. So I just went ahead and screenshotted the table in chapter 28 that lists the different code chunk output options. You see I have it listed in my files. So I have outputs.png in the folder that I'm working from. And what I do is I use the knitter include graphics line. So when I click on this, it's going to include that outputs.png file. And let's go back to that rendered file. And every time you render, by the way, it does save your document. Here we can see that it includes this screenshot. I encourage you to play around with the different options, especially in that first code chunk. So for example, what happens when you select message equals true or warning equals true? Play around with that on your own. And I also encourage you to play around with this code chunk here to see what eval, echo, and etc. do. So go ahead on your own, make sure that you do that. You might be wondering how to create a new code chunk. You can do that a few different ways. One, you can manually type it like this. And you see automatically it turns everything under it into a code chunk. This closes out that code chunk. So here I'm going to label it. And to do that, you type hashtag and then the vertical line. We're going to say label practice code chunk. Or you could do it this way. You can just go up here and click the C. So either way, just as long as you know that this is everything that's going to be run with R code. And you specify too that you're going to be using R by putting R in those curly brackets. As I mentioned earlier, rendering issues are something that I see a lot in this class. And so rendering issues happen when you have a space, when everything isn't flush to the left. When you click render, what you're going to see is something like this. I'm going to go ahead and refresh over here. Once you've rendered, you refresh, and you see this, right? So this is what I mean by rendering issue. And that's really it for Quarto documents. They're not terribly complicated. What you do is you click up here on this plus if you want to create a new one. Title it. So we're going to call this Quarto Practice. Make yourself as the author. You can select what type of output, always in this class, it's HTML. But you can also create presentations and interactive formats. We're not going to do that in this class, but it's just good that you know. Click Create. And here you can edit all of these different code chunks. And when you save it, it's going to pop up in here. So let's click Don't Save for this because we didn't do anything. We'll save here. So you can click File, Save. Although, as I said, every time you render, it's going to save. So Quarto example, we're going to save it. Let's just replace it so you can see how that works. Exit out of it. And then I can open it right back up. I can also just open the HTML file. I can click Open in Editor, or I can view it in the web browser from here. That's it. That's it. That's all I'm requiring of you for Quarto documents. As I mentioned, you can do a lot of customization with them, but we don't need that here, just the basics. And every challenge and your final, you're going to submit both that QMD and HTML file. So let's get R back up here. Over here, these would be the files that I want you to submit. And that's it on Quarto documents. I encourage you to play around with the exercises that I've listed in here, and then make sure that you've looked at least challenge 1.